Let me fix up my chat filter, wait for my moderators to join in. Um, one of them, one of my special moderators will be Mrs. Contrarian again, and maybe one or two of my other moderators may chime in as well. Um, I will. So I'm going to be talking about the Black Manosphere and Black YouTubers and people in the pro-Black online space. But I'm not going to be talking about any one particular today. As I'm growing as a content creator, I think it's more prudent for me not to call out anyone in particular so that I don't receive the same, you know, treatment. So, but yeah, the title is is that pro black YouTubers give horrible advice, and I stand on that. And I'm gonna flesh out why that is the case often, not all the time, but why it's often the case. I think they give horrible advice on education, career, relationships, politics, a lot of things. Now we'll be drinking from my trusty water jug. Um, so, welcome to everyone coming into the chat room. I'm not going to keep doing this which country every day. If people can't tell where I'm from the obvious American accent that I'm using, then I don't know what to tell you. So I'm pretty sure someone in France doesn't talk like me. Pretty sure in Dubai people don't talk like me unless they are Americans. Pretty sure someone in Mongolia doesn't talk like me. So I'm not going to be answering anymore. Which country are you from? You hear what language I'm speaking in. So I don't speak British English, don't speak Australian English, don't speak New Zealand English, don't speak Singaporean English, don't speak Irish English, and yada, yada, yada. But yeah, so again, I'm airing a little bit of dirty laundry from the black community, and I know a lot of people hate when I do that. Um, it's okay. But yeah, um, and I'll take some random questions. Yesterday was World Mental Health Day, and I wanted to field more questions on that. What's up, Carlton? And I really didn't get a chance to field a lot of mental health questions that I wanted to yesterday, which it's like again October 10th was World Mental Health Day, so I wanted to really talk about that, but instead it's as often as the case when I open up a Ask Me Anything format, the the conversation went all over the place. So in any case, guys, um, and I will be ignoring comments that have nothing to do with the topic. If you want to be autistic, do it on your own time. So, which goes back to the World Mental Health Day of yesterday. But in any case, like I said, I find on YouTube and in social media generally, a lot of pro black content creators, they just give horrible, they just put out bad information. is either misleading, patently false, or not useful. What do I mean by that? Like advice they give on like education or relationships, nutrition, on careers, on politics, on it's, for instance, like one YouTuber recently was talking about, dating white women isn't going to save you or whatever. And I'm like, so dating some ratchet will? It's not whether they decide to date a snow bunny or not. It's that they choose not to be with someone who's toxic. And toxicity knows no race. But let's just say that toxic women are overrepresented in the black community. Rainy Girl says, does blue hair dye cause mental illness? No, I think you're looking at the causal arrow in the wrong way. What often is the case is that people who have a strong sense of independence, who also tend to have, you know, maybe some mental health issues dealing with depression, anxiety, maybe a bit on the narcissistic side with their personality, or they may be a bit neurodivergent. Those are the folks who are going to be more expressive with body art. I mean, there's a running trope within the manosphere that the septum piercing is a clear sign that a woman is delusional, and probably is probably delusional and some sort of like raging feminist. But no, hair dye does not cause mental illness. There's no evidence for that, I should say. Mrs. Contrarian is here. Hey, Mahal. Mrs. Contrarian says, hi, Mahal. Hi, everyone. I love how Streamlabs will catch stuff. Ramon Safusa's tattoos are against the Bible. I don't know where you gather that. There are multiple, since there are multiple books or chapters, whatever you want to call them in the Bible, there are people, there are biblical characters who have had piercings and tattoos in in the Bible. So eh, well, being in the Old Testament, there was what 200, what was it, 214, I forgot. I think it was like 214 commandments. Someone, if you want to fact check me on that, I think it was like 214 commandments. Maybe one of them uh, addressed um, body art, but I'm not aware of it. In any case, I don't. That is one of the most inconsequential sins you could commit is having a tattoo. It's just as dumb as like Muslims, usually black Muslims straight out of jail, they be talking about, oh, you shouldn't eat Skittles, my brother. You know, Skittles has pork that has gelatin, and the gelatin is made from pork. Like, ninja, so what? Like, people be caring about stupid shit. Declan says Russia's the safest and freest country. Yeah, sure. And Klingons are vegans. Oh, this is I put one guy in timeout. Thank you. Mm-mm-mm. Mrs. Contrarian said, "Hi, Carlton. Hope you're well." Carlton says, "I see Muslim brothers eating ham sandwiches like a mug." Yo, because I lived in Philly, so there was so many black Muslims in West Philly and in North Philly, and yo, I remember they were harassing me. Like so the the school I was going to was a like a magnet program, and because they had just opened up that new that new campus, they didn't have a working cafeteria. So every day they just gave us like a lunch ticket to get like a free slice of they gave us a slice of pizza and a soda or something like that. And of course that wasn't like a well-rounded meal. So sometimes my folks would give me um give me money to go buy like a hoagie. That's how you know I'm from Philly, right? Buy me a hoagie for lunch. And I remember I had a turkey hoagie, and these little Muslim assholes was trying to steal my hoagie. Like, yo, you know we Muslim. Yeah, I want that turkey hoagie because I'm like, what? Nigga, go buy you one. And like I said, that's why I don't really respect a lot of Black American Muslims because most of them became Muslims in jail, or their fathers became Muslims in jail and then spread the faith to them. I remember I lost a friend because I said it on Facebook once. I don't give a fuck. It's true. Maybe that was offensive to him, but I don't care because it was true. Um, Now, at least my mom, we were Muslim, but and before because I know people gonna be like, oh, you're just anti, you're Islamophobic or whatever. And I want to remind people like my name is Aman, and I was actually a Muslim as a young child. We went to mosque. Okay, my mom had converted to Islam, and she didn't have to go to jail to do it. She did it because she was one of those '70s hippies. She was one of those pro black '70 hippies. Had the big fro, turned Muslim, gave me a Muslim name. So several of my cousins are the same way. Their names are also Aman or Jamal or and, you got other we all have like Muslim names. You'll find that a lot of Gen X black men have either Muslim or African names because that was the strongest era of the pro black power movement. And so a lot of people back then named their children with African or Muslim names. So that is sort of a giveaway that that you know what era that person was born in. If you hear someone whose name is something like Mustafa or Abdul or Jamal or Ahmad, something like that, he was probably born somewhere in the mid '70s to early '80s. Okay, what's up, Erica? She said hello from Arizona. What part of Arizona you repping? I've been meaning to go to Arizona. I actually had a was it Arizona or New Mexico? I think it was Arizona. I had a chance to run an office for the call center company I worked for at the time, and I didn't want to go because I'm like, well, I don't know anyone there. It's too hot. It's too hot. Where am I gonna live? And I was thinking, but I'm planning on going back overseas. Looking at it now, and I should have taken the opportunity. But yeah, Kareem. Yep, that's another common one. But yeah, so getting back to what I'm saying, so like I said, the brother, I watch him loyally though, and but he what he was saying was whack. Like he was saying, well, brothers, dating these white women and whatever is not gonna help the black community or whatever. And I guess you could extend that to Latinas and Asians as well. But he's kept it like on snow bunnies, and he was saying this whole gender war is a byproduct of white supremacy. And even if that's the case, we didn't start the gender war. Black men, well, sorry, black men didn't start the gender war. I had a little fluff on my hair. Sorry, black men didn't start the gender war. Black women started it back in like the late 70s. Ever since like things like Oprah Winfrey and all these little um, black womanist novels like Terry McMillan and all these other women who just dogged out black men from the late 70s, the 80s, the 90s. Had songs like You Gotta Have a J.O.B. If You Want to Get With Me, stuff like that. Um, it's like Oprah made popularized the concept that black men were deadbeat dads. And I've heard that she basically was forced to apologize for that because it didn't stand up to scrutiny when you look at the statistics, looking at statistics coming from the U.S. Census, um, coming from statistics coming from Black demographics, um, CDC, Statista, all these Pew Research Center, all these centers of information that keep data on stuff like this. And they actually showed that black men were actually the most involved in their children's life of every racial group in America. So the whole deadbeat dad trope didn't work. And then it was these pathetic black women back in the 80s and 90s. They said this stuff so much that it became common knowledge, even though the claim was patently false. But the common knowledge within the black community was that black men were an endangered species, that most of us were either locked up, dead, or gay. If any of you are millennials or Gen X, you know what I'm talking about. You've heard this growing up, that black men were an endangered species, and that it, black women couldn't find many eligible men because they were either dead, uh, gay, um, or in jail. They forgot to mention that most of the eligible men were either married or already dating someone. Duh. But yeah. Ziggy Rotten says, "Is the gender war fixable or is it a permanent problem now?" Well, I'm gonna get you're kind of jumping ahead, but to 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 kind of get to where you're already at with that question, I think the gender war is over. And to be honest, black women won, but it was a Pyrrhic victory. Do you guys know what a Pyrrhic victory is? Pyrrhic victory means you win, but at cost greater than what was merited in that victory. So black women won the gender war, but at the cost that most black men now are refusing to marry them and are dating out at a higher rate than they have at any other point in American history. So it was a Pyrrhic victory. What's up? What's up? He says, long time, broski. What's up from Miami? As Harvey says, Jack is so triggered. Well, it's probably because he's a retard. uh, Garaya TV says if you are black and Muslim, you're fighting double wars. I don't think so. Like I said, when I first started traveling 8 years ago, this was Trump's first administration. The TSA was kind of like keyed up to look for certain things. So I was worried because of my first name that I would get extra scrutiny because I had already remembered that prior to me traveling, Muhammad Ali's son, I believe, I think it was Muhammad Ali's son or grandson was harassed while traveling because of his Muslim last name. And I'm like, oh shit, I might get the same treatment. But I didn't. Maybe that's because my first name is Muslim, but my last name isn't. Or maybe it's just that he got extra scrutiny because of how he presented himself through the TSA. I can't say, but I had no problems traveling. At least not when it came to that, no. He said, I'm just bored trolling random streamers. Yeah, because you're a fucking autistic twit and I'm banning you from my site. I can't stand you retards. Go get a fucking life. I can't stand these little autistic trolls. Like, and I've mentioned this as already before. I mentioned this yesterday on World Mental Health Day, and I mentioned this a week ago. Most trolls are neurodivergent guys. They are autistic. They have ADHD. They have severe depression or some other neurodevelopmental disorder. People who are neurodivergent tend to have poor sleeping patterns. Many of them, particularly autistic people, suffer from parasomnia, which are sleeping disorders, which is why they will be up all night and they get bored, so they troll people. I literally work with a client as a life coach who she trolls people because she thinks it's funny, no matter how completely inappropriate it is. Like she claims to love elephants, and in doing so, somehow in her fucked up ass mind, she thinks it's okay to to send messages to a elephant sanctuary asking them things like why were wild elephants raping rhinos who are an endangered species, and when the elephants get old do they get to eat the meat and stuff like that. I'm like, why are you sending these messages? So they blocked her, well, and left her on red on other occasions. And I'm like, you need antipsychotic medication. And yes, people with moderate to severe autism have to take antipsychotic medication because they are low because low functioning autistic people cannot simply get behavioral training alone. That simply won't do it. They have to actually be on a psychopharmacological medication, which is typically some sort of antipsychotic medication like Risperdal or something like that. And like I said, a lot. And as I was saying yesterday in World Mental Health Day, the reason why online online communication seems so toxic is because people who have mental health problems and who have neurodevelopmental disorders are overrepresented in social media. They gather here because they're not the sort of folks who feel comfortable doing external activities, a little enclave at home in their parents' basement or wherever they keep their retarded asses and just go online and troll people. And I really don't have any tolerance for that because you need to get medication and help yourself. Kevin says I like Chinese women. I love all Asian women. I don't know if you mean Chinese, specifically Chinese, or you mean Chinese as in all East Asian women, but I love East Asian women. I mean, my wife is here right now moderating. She's East Asian, so Jackson, he even admitted, he said, I'm a retard, but I'm younger and worth more than you. Who cares? I'm healthier. I don't, my head isn't all fucked up. I'd rather be healthy and smart than rich and a fucking retard. And that's why you got banned. By the way, I get paid to do this while you sit there and just troll people for free. So yeah, so you're truly pretty stupid. Grad TV says you just proved my point, bro. Thank you. Which point did I prove? You gotta remind me. Oh, oh, I got it. About Muhammad Ali's son getting harassed from TSA. Again, this was like 9 years ago, though, brother. And again, that is a that is a singular example. I can't you you know you can't make a probable uh you can't make a probabilistic um claim from a singular example. So I can't say because of him that is a problem. Now, what I was saying that yes, Muslims were under higher scrutiny in the first Trump administration, but I don't know if that meant that both black and Muslims were fighting a double war, like culturally speaking, of course, right? Because really, Trump wasn't really coming down on black people at all, nor is he in his second administration. He's coming down on immigrants, mostly illegal, illegal immigrants. So, uh, most black Americans are foundational to the country. They aren't immigrants. So his policies right now don't really affect us. And as far as him cracking down on these inner cities, that's actually helping black people because black people have been crying out for help for generations and their own politicians have refused to help them. There's the same black democratic leaders who are crashing out for illegal aliens wouldn't do anything for black people for the longest time. And so now they're trying to yell racism against Trump when when what he's doing is actually helping the black community because they're throwing illegal aliens in the black community, taking up the resources that were supposed to go to those people. So I don't see a double war on Muslims and black people again, unless those black people who are Muslim are from other countries, right? Then I can see that. And like I said, the whole Muhammad Ali's son or grandson or whoever getting harassed, that was a singular example. I didn't hear of too many other examples like that, but it did worry me at the time. I will be honest. Yes, it did worry me because my name is a Muslim. I'm not myself Muslim. And to the point, if they had even asked me, I'd have been like, dude, I'm atheist. So, I mean, I don't know. It probably depends on the TSA they're dealing with. But for all the problems people said they had with the TSA, I have never had a problem with the TSA in the past 8 years. The only problem I do have with the TSA is that it's an unnecessary process to go through to get on the plane. I don't really think it's make us safer. I think it's just security theatrics. Ziggy says you're 100% correct. Carlton says wild. Ziggy said I worked a job taking care of them. It can really get bad. Yeah. Uh-uh. Garage says imagine if it can happen with Ali's grandson. What about unknown individuals? Yeah, I mean that's a fair point, but what I'm saying is we can't make a probabilistic we can't make a probabilistic claim off of a single example. Probabilistic claims come from looking at uh, aggregate things, right? So that's what I'm saying. But anyway, getting back to what I was saying about some of these pro black commentators, and I was saying one guy was saying that these guys dating white women aren't necessarily making things better for themselves because the black community is still suffering. And I'm like, well, so what? I was like, I even left a comment respectfully, of course, on that video saying to each his own, but I'm sorry, I'm not going to date women that I don't like or who I'm not attracted to purely out of racial unity. Not to mention that racial unity is a muddled concept anyway. Plus, like I said, we didn't start the gender war. The women did. And the black women in our community started the gender war back in the late 70s. They called us everything but children of God. Like I said, they said we were an endangered species because we were either getting locked up, getting shot, or gay. And they were saying most all the eligible men were taken. And it was like, and they never looked back at themselves thinking, is it that all the eligible men are taken and the rest are just gay or in jail or dead? Or is it just that you yourself are not dateable? Maybe you're not dateable. Maybe you have a bad habit of attracting low value men. They never looked at it that way. And then they would hear the same things repeated in in the media of the day. I mean, we didn't have social media, but we had daytime TV. We had we had the magazines. So most people instead of social media, most people got their information from print media and daytime TV and primetime news. And you would hear the same misinformation reinforced. So it became common knowledge that black men were just trash. And like I said, it was Oprah Winfrey's talk show that reinforced the now debunked claim that black men were deadbeat dads when it comes out looking at again US Census data, CDC, um, black demographics, that black men are actually the most involved fathers of every racial group in America. So that and she when I googled, because people keep saying that she had to apologize for spreading that misinformation back in the 80s and 90s. But when I googled it, it said that she never actually apologized. So I don't know if that's true or not. Yeah, Carlton says Maury did a number on black men. Yeah, Maury, all those daytime talk shows, brother. Maury Povich, Sally Jesse Raphael, Donald. What was his name? What was the white guy with the big glasses? Donald. He came on like right before Sally Jesse Raphael. Um, of course, Jerry. uh, Funny thing is, a lot of those talk show hosts were actually pretty likable. It's just their shows hit just straight, just off it trash. My favorite talk show of all of them was Ricky Lake. I used to call that Tricky Lake. But my favorite one out of all of them was Ricky Lake. Then remember there was like yeah, Geraldo Rivera. He had his. There was this other Latino guy, Charles something or other. Then there was another white woman, and it was funny because she was pretty. She was blonde. I thought she was like young, well, youngish. I thought she was like in her like early 30s. Found out she was like actually 50. I'm like, God damn, she's 50. Yo, but I think the daytime talk shows reached its zenith in like the mid '90s, like mid late '90s, right? Like I said, my favorite was Ricky Lake. That like I think Ricky Lake appealed to a younger audience. That's why I liked it. And it would come on like right after school. Like it would be on like an hour after we got home from school. So when I wasn't so if I wasn't uh doing sports or out with friends or working, especially in '95, uh the days I wasn't working, I would come straight home. Now, usually be on the phone doing homework while watching TV. Um, and I would watch Ricky Lake. I love that show because it, I don't know. And I was like, man, if Ricky was smaller, she would have got clapped up. Carmen says a lot of daytime court shows are fake. I had two active friends on it. Oh yeah, yeah, I know as well. I had a friend in college that was on Judge Mathis. So what people, but actually they are fake. But if people actually the same thing with the talk shows like with Maury Povich and a lot of is fake, but they do reveal the real stuff in the fine print of the show if you watch. I think either at the beginning of the show or the end of the show. So like when Maury Povich does the lie detector test, it tells you in the credits that the results of the lie detector test um aren't aren't the real results, but just the results they're using for the show to make it more entertaining. But they give like an address that you can write into the show and get the actual results of those lie detector tests. So, which is funny. Um, I might do a whole live stream about why lie detectors are pseudoscience, but I don't want to get in trouble with the government. Suffice to say that anyone with a psychology degree can defeat a lie detector test. That's all I'm going to say about that at this point. But anyway, getting back to Maury. So yeah, the results that Maury gives in a lie detector test, they say in the credits of the show that those aren't the actual results of the lie detector test, but that you can get the actual results if you want to write into the show and get it. And likewise with the court shows, they tell you that the judges that it's not an actual court proceeding, that those judges are actually there just as a legal are just there as a legal consultant, and that both parties on the show have have written an a legal agreement to go by whatever the arbitration is on the show. But all of the court stuff is just pure theatrics. So Carlton is absolutely right. So if you watch Judge Mathis, if you watch Judge Joe Brown, if you watch uh um uh what's the little Judge Judy and all the other, like, they're basically, they are technically, yes, they were judges in their actual legal careers, but on these talk shows, these court talk shows, they are there legally just as legal consultants. They don't convey actual like court, like they don't they don't actually convey actual court powers. They're there as legal consultants to which each party that's on the show has signed an agreement to go by whatever the arbitration is on the show. So I had a Russian friend that I was dating in college briefly, and she was on Judge Mathis, and she was like, "Yeah, he really, he he was like he really yelled at me and all this sort of stuff." Then one of my roommates, one of my roommates I was living with at the time was on one of those judge shows. I can't remember if it was also Mathis or Judge Joe Brown, but I literally, because we was like, Brian, it was like, yo, you was on a court show, and we do it, like he was smiling. Wait, was that him or was that? No, no, wait. Now I'm trying to remember because I can't remember if that was actually Brian or it was a lookalike. Because I remember we were laughing, so I think that wasn't actually him. I can't remember now. Because we're talking about like 20, 23 years ago. My friend Brian was my roommate. I can't remember if that was actually him or it was someone who looked like him. But I remember we were all watching. We was like, "Yo, Brian, what's up?" I think that was a lookalike. But no, my Russian friend, no, she was actually on the show. She was a cutie. I remember because I saw her the first year I came to the University of Maryland. Everybody wanted her. My Vietnamese friend was up on her. And I remember we was at one of the campus parties. He was dancing with her. He was like, "Yo," he was like all the black ops telling me, "Yo, spit, spit, yo, spit, yo, spit." He was funny as shit. Um, and like 3 years later, she and I got together. I was like, "Yo, I always had a crush on you." And it's like when you mess with my boy Ed, she's like, "For real?" She's was cheesing. She came over the house. Um, but I never clapped. I'm sorry. I let all you fine gentlemen down, but I did not clap. See, at least I don't lie on my joint. But yeah, I didn't clap. I could have. I don't know why I didn't. God, I was stupid back then. But yeah, I definitely should have clapped. Crazy. She was. She looked. How can I say? She looked sort of like. She looked sort of like Bad Baby. Sort of like that. Not exactly like Bad Baby, but she looks sort of like Bad Baby. If you can picture that. Meet me outside. How about that? No, so she is. No, but that, she looks sort of like Bad Baby if I can recall well, because again, this was like 20. This was like 22 years ago. So yeah, Carter says Ricky Lake was fire. Yeah, but yeah, so those black women started the cultural war with us. We didn't start it. They started that crap because they saw what their parents went through, and they was like, "Well, I don't want to be like my mom or whatever." Carter says Umar would be proud to hear I didn't clap. Yeah, except he wouldn't be proud that I clapped a bunch of other people who weren't black at the time. Spanish. Uh, didn't have Asian yet. I didn't get that came much later. Um, but Spanish, Egyptian, Pakistani. um, what else? I, I guess Blasian still counts as black. I don't know. I don't know if Blasian still counts as black or half black and half Indian still counts as black. She was like a Kamala type person. She was half Jamaican, half Indian. Not making that up. Oop, why did I unhide him? Oops. Didn't mean to And I did have other white chicks. It was just she did not clap. She wasn't the one I clapped. The Russian. I should have. I should have did it for America. For America. Should have did it for America. Show these Russians what's up. Should have skied and said Red Dawn. Most people would even get that. Oh man, let me stop. What's up, Hillary? Um, but yeah, like the deadbeat dad trope has been debunked. As far as us being underachievers, black men have crawled steadily into the middle class. There are more black men now living in middle class than you know, than um, than any time in the past, I believe. And yes, black women are uh, earning more degrees than black men, but that has not translated into having a higher income than black men. Black men still have a higher income than black women, and so this isn't meant to be a discussion on the gender war itself. It's meant to just talk about how misleading or incorrect information is coming out of these pro black YouTubers, and like trying to tell black men that they should be more involved in dating and marrying black men. I'm like, why? And the particular person I was watching is someone who's highly critical of people like Dr. Umar and other like Hotep type guys, but and he but he still has a pro black streak in him. Like he even said that he told his sons like they have to date black women. I'm like, damn. I was like, well, if I were the kids, uh, I just wouldn't date until I'm out of my father's uh, home, so I can date whoever I want. So there's a lot of misinformation that comes out of the pro black spaces, out of the black manosphere, the black YouTubers. That was one example. Then they constantly give bad information about education. A lot of these pro black YouTubers are often telling black men that college is a waste of time, that they should be instead just learning a trade or working. And I'm like, you do realize statistically meant that people who have degrees out earn people with no degrees. And so then you have all these conservatives and people in the red pill space saying, well, yeah, that's true. But if you parse it by the type of degree, then that changes. That most of those people out earning people without degrees are people who have STEM degrees. That is true to a point, but look, a a high tide lifts all boats. Generally, it is the case that a person with a degree, even if it is a liberal arts degree, will out earn someone without a degree because when you go to apply to jobs nowadays, there is a lot of credentialism going on. Most A lot of entry level jobs won't even bother like considering you for a position unless you have a degree. And this is why I say that a lot of people in a red pill space, not just the black manosphere, but the red pill space in general, are being misleading when they're telling men that college is often a scam. Like, rest in peace to Charlie Kirk. This is one of the few things that I've always disagreed with Charlie Kirk about when he would show up on these college campuses for Turning Point USA, and he will argue that college is a scam. And a lot of his claims had merit, but he, like Neil deGrasse Tyson has said to DJ Vlad, most of the people arguing that college is a scam or a waste of time are people who don't hold degrees themselves, as was the case with Charlie Kirk, right? Or they are people who have college degrees and didn't and failed to be able to utilize those degrees for whatever reason. So Neil deGrasse Tyson said this, and I'm like, he's absolutely right. The people typically in the red pill space who argue against education for young men, again, are either people themselves who don't hold degrees or they have degrees, but they're jaded because they were never able to utilize them. But whose fault is that? And again, it's just misguided to tell people in a in a job in a job market that is highly cognitively loaded that you don't need a degree. You do need a degree because often you need a degree just to apply for an entry level job. So telling people they don't need a degree is crazy. Now, if you're gonna say, well, now if they're gonna say, but you can learn a trade, and will that will and most a lot of people who learn a trade can out earn people with college degrees. Now that is true, but there's still a caveat. Trade school can be just as expensive as going to college. That's number one, which is why yesterday I was giving advice to a young man who asked me what's advice for someone coming out of high school. And I was like, go to college, get a practical degree. And I told him a practical degree doesn't have to be STEM. It just has to be a useful degree that you can actually get a job with once you come out of college. That's not always a STEM degree. It just has to be practical. And I said, if you're not going to go to college, you can go get a trade. But I was saying the third option is military, because I was saying getting going to trade school can be just as expensive as college. Like there are people taking out, student loans and getting scholarships and grants to go to trade school the same as college. So if you cannot afford to go to trade school, then there's the military where you can learn to trade in the military. And he kind of poo pooed on that. He was like, the military. And I'm like, look, that is an option for a lot of people. A lot of people have climbed into the upper middle class through joining the military. Especially if you do a career in the military, you have look, you're not worried about them. You like if you're in the, if you're in the military, you're not worrying about a mortgage. You're not worrying about debt. Um, your food. You get free housing on 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 base. You get a housing allowance. Yeah, I mean, you get a food and housing allowance, right? Um, they off, the military will often send you to college through the GI Bill. So I mean, it's not a bad idea. So, but I was like, what you don't want to do is waste your time chasing women and working jobs that have no path to financial freedom. So maybe he listened, maybe he didn't. I don't know. Name only says it's called meritocracy. Yeah. McCollum says you get discounts from places as a military vet. Yeah, and I mean like shopping at the PX is tax free, like the PX or the AFES, right? And then like I said, when you off post or off base, you get all sorts of discounts as well, right? You live a much you live a much more affordable lifestyle in the military, and you don't have to be someone. And again, for people who be like, yeah, but I'm not trying to die, blah 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 blah. Most positions in the military are support positions. Most people in the military aren't even in combat; they're doing support positions. And there's people who are in combat arms who have never seen the field outside of training, like doing training exercises and CQB and stuff like that. But their ODA may never get called up to do some do some wet work. Unless you like infantry, you probably going to see some usually uh the conventional ground forces see a little bit of action, and most of them want to see some action. That's why they do it. But anyway, getting back to the subject. So, like I said, the black women started the culture war. So I don't want to really hear that this was a tactic of the white supremacists. Have they maybe added fuel to the fire? Oh yeah, I'm sure there have been uh some psyops going on where the gender war between black men and black women has been egged on by folks who saw an advantage to seeing us um, at each other's necks. But whose fault is that though? If we're the ones fighting, like we could simply just put down our arms and say, yeah, we're not going to fight amongst each other so that we could get ahead. But, we don't. What's some Mubashir? Yeah, egg doing by the media. Like the media has been like the main culprit because, like I said, all those talk shows from the 80s and 90s, all the stuff in primetime news always making it look like black men were these super criminals, or like Hillary Clinton called us back in the 90s, super predators. Um, and of course, so which also means, yeah, then politicians were getting into it, both on both sides, Democrats and Republicans. This is why I keep telling black people, Democrats aren't your friends, liberals aren't your friends. Malcolm X warned us 60 years ago, liberals aren't our friends. You have one group of people who just overtly hate you. Then you have another group that hate you, but then smile and try to be your friend. So this is why you should be exercise more political independence. But leaving that aside, so let who you date and marry is a very personal issue, and that's why I said for this guy to usually not be on his, usually not for him to usually not be so pro black as people like other black YouTubers, who are in the space that I'm not going to mention today. Um, he was definitely using one of those pro black talking points because dating and marrying is a very personal decision, and no one should be deciding whom they want to spend the rest of their life with or whom they want to contact with their genitals based on racial solidarity. That's just stupid as fuck to me, that I should only date people whom who I share a racial affinity towards so that we can grow the community throughout through our efforts to build a family. Like, I'm sorry, I'm not thinking of racial solidarity when I put my dick in someone. Sorry. I mean, if that's just eugenics at this point. Thanks for catching those idiots, Carlton. Um, but yeah, like I said, I don't have anything against people dating black women or anyone or anything against people not dating black women, but to tell someone just by virtue of the fact that they are a black man that they should be dating black women out of racial unity just is just completely wrongheaded. It's just completely wrongheaded. Like, you should date whomever you want to date because one, you are attracted to that person, and two, you want to build a future with that person based on how you based on your own personal metrics of want what you want in a woman, and vice versa what that woman wants in a man. It should not be based on, well, I need to be with this person because they are also black, and as black people we need to build strong black families to, like, I'm not forsaking my happiness for the black community. Fuck the community. The community didn't do shit for me in the past, nor will it in the future. I'm not sacrificing my happiness, nor am I going to date women with whom I am not attracted. I mean, to whom I am not attracted for the sake of of black unity or the black community. Like, fuck that. Moving on from that, like I said, with education, then you got these idiotic uh, black YouTubers and content creators telling these young black men don't go to college, and if you do only take up STEM degrees, again, not every STEM degree is a practical degree. Science degrees are STEM degrees, but they are completely useless unless you go on to graduate school. Like you can like typically the only thing you can do with a bachelor's level science degree is be a research assistant. So whether you're doing psychology, biology, chemistry, physics, you really can't do anything with an undergrad science degree other than be a research assistant. And even when you do apply as a research assistant, you have to compete against people who have masters or maybe even doctoral level degrees. So who do you think those those people are going to lean towards hiring for those research assistant jobs? They're probably going to go with the person with the masters or even the PhD over the over the one with just a bachelor's degree. So really, that's why I said people need to stop talking about STEM degrees. There's really, and I said this to the young guy yesterday, really the only STEM degrees that are really practical are engineering, and there's many different fields of engineering where you're talking about civil engineering, fire protection engineering, mechanical engineering, electrical engineering, aerospace engineering, and many others, chemical engineering, um, or mathematics or computer science. So those are the three basically: mathematics, engineering, and computer science. Which and sometimes they might have it as info science or whatever. Um, but there are also practical degrees that aren't STEM degrees in business. And I was telling him that like within if you get into a business school, um, then finance or accounting are great degrees on the undergraduate level. And I was like, there may even be there are a few liberal arts degrees that are practical as well. The only problem, the only problem with liberal arts degrees, even if they are practical, is that there's usually limited, um, limited seats for those. Like art history is actually a practical degree because it is a specific field for which you actually need a background in art history to do. Like you can't go into art history with a degree completely unrelated to art history. You have to have a degree in art history, similar to like, English. You want to be an English teacher. You can't be an English teacher with a background in geology. Like you, you have to have a you have to have a background in English. However, the problem is that those liberal arts degrees usually have very limited positions. Let me get some water. Sorry. All right. But yeah, most like I said, the practical degrees are either gonna be like engineering, computer science, mathematics, finance, accounting. And I would say physics, but like I said, you even with physics, usually the physics degree is useful, but again, just like with other undergrad science degrees, usually you're going to be competing with someone who has a graduate level degree. So that's why I said not all STEM degrees are practical. Um, but these, like I said, these red pill YouTubers and Black Manosphere YouTubers will say, "Well, college is a scam or it's a waste of time." And again, like Neil deGrasse Tyson was telling DJ Vlad, the only people who say college is a scam or a waste of time are people who either didn't get a degree or they got a degree that they weren't able to use, so they're jaded. But statistics show that people who do have degrees out earn people who don't have degrees, and that's even the case even after you fine tune what degrees those people have, because then these red pill people will say, always will say, well, yeah, that's the case, but that's only for people with who hold professional or STEM degrees. And I'm like, no, that's not true because these same folks probably haven't been in the job market for years, if not decades. They don't realize the job market is saturated with credentialism. You have to have you have to have degrees just for entry level jobs nowadays. Entry level jobs. Entry level jobs, guys. I'm talking about like you're at Sears and you want to apply for assistant manager. And you need a degree. I mean, anyone can get a sales associate job. You can be 16 and get a sales associate job at Sears. But if you wanted to be an assistant manager, if you wanted to go on it, if you wanted an entry level management position at Sears, you had to have a degree. Sears, and that's all the department stores. You know, Sears, Macy's, Hex, all those places. Um, Even something like daycare. You know, it used to be the case because my best friend, he was an Indian guy. His mom used to have a daycare center. You know, in their home. Nowadays is the case that you can't even open up a daycare center unless you have a degree in early child care in early education and child care. Like, since when do you need credentials to watch a bunch of little children? Like, this is what I'm talking about. So the fact that, and like, so the retort by conservatives and some of those people in the red pill space is like, well, yeah, credentialism is just absurd. We need to do away with it. Yeah, we need to do away with it, but until we do away with credentialism in the job market, we have to play the game as it is being played, which means you still have to hold a degree just for an entry level position job. Or even if you want to do something as, you know, as something as easy as just watching kids, you gotta have a degree now for that to watch kids. Like, who would think it's it's basically making a child care worker hold a degree is essentially like telling someone to babysit you. You have to go to you have to take at least 2 to 4 years of school to babysit. So that's basically what child daycare workers are doing. Child care, workers are doing is babysitting. Calvin says Bloods are Crips. Ask your mother. She's fucked both. Anyway, um, getting back to the topic. So these Black Manosphere people, and first of all, the fact that Black men already don't hold as many degrees as other men in other respective racial categories, we should be reinforcing them to go to school, not telling them not to go to school. Especially then when they start talking politics, like, well, you know, um, universities are just liberal coded and stuff like that, and feminist and all that. Yeah, they are. So yes, there was a lot of feminism. There was a lot of liberalism when I was in college. So you deal with it. If you can still hold fast to your beliefs, you can still be a fundamentalist Christian or conservative and go to a very left leaning institution. I mean, look at it. Some of the most powerful Republican politicians went to very left leaning institutions. Ted Cruz is a Harvard or Yale uh, graduate. George Bush, Yale. Like, pretty much all the top Republican politicians went to left leaning institutions, yet they are still steadfast in their conservative beliefs. if you are already a conservative, it's very unlikely you're going to leave school turning into a progressive or a socialist. That's only for people who don't already hold strong political beliefs. Like when I went into college, I didn't hold any strong political beliefs. So my beliefs fluctuated over the years. As when I was 18, I was a liberal Republican. And yes, that really exists. Nowadays, they call those rhinos, which is Republican in name only, RINO, rhinos. But yeah, there were liberal Republicans back then. But when I went into school, you know, I, I fluctuated in my political beliefs somewhat, although I was always like somewhat of a liberal of the classical version of liberal, which is more of the a classical liberal is somewhat on the right politically, but holds some leftist type views, I guess you could say. But yeah, I went from being a liberal Republican to being a being the Green Party, then being a progressive Democrat, then I went independent and it was just a progressive independent. And now I'm still an independent, but I no longer consider myself progressive. I'm somewhere between a classical liberal or libertarian sort of person. So, but in any case, telling black men that they shouldn't earn degrees when that's the only thing that will help them in a marketplace that's becoming more and more beholden to having credentials behind their name is a losing strategy. It is a losing strategy. And yes, they can opt for trade school, but bear in mind, trade school is just as expensive as college. It's just as expensive. And then the other issue with trade school is just that not everyone wants to work with their hands. Not everyone wants to work with their hands. Not everyone wants to be a plumber or electrician or, sewage management, um, all that other sort of stuff. Not everyone wants to do that. Then, like I said, the third option is the military. Really, there's other options. The other option is that you can be a bum, or or you can just work at a you can work a McJob for the rest of your life. Um, but those McJobs you usually have to work two or three of them to equal one decent job. That's why people always say you need to have multiple streams of income. That's because, well, you probably don't have a good income from your job as it is now. Because if you have a good enough income, you don't need multiple streams of income. I hate when people get that advice, but whatever. I don't want to get into that. What's up, Ray? He says you want to fight live Marine versus Army. I don't know what you talking about. Eddie says, is that an Asian rice hat? It is an Asian rice hat. Uh, I actually got it from an anime convention. They marketed it as a ninja hat. I don't know why they called it a ninja hat, but anyway, yeah. So that's the second thing. So first, like I said, you have these black YouTubers telling men they should date black women out of racial solidarity. Now that then they're telling black men that they shouldn't go to college. They should just get a trade. But if they do go to college, only take a STEM degree. Like I said, most STEM degrees aren't even practical. The only practical STEM degrees is engineering, computer science, and mathematics, because the bulk of STEM are science degrees. And like I said, unless you go on all the way to graduate school, an undergraduate science degree is useless because the only thing you can do with it is a research assistant job, and most of those jobs tend to go to the people who have graduate degrees. So um, then they're often wrong about politics too. They it's mixed. Many of them many of the pro black YouTubers lean conservative, but then they'll mix it with a lot of either Pan Africanist views or pro black issues. That he says here in Thailand we use that while farming the paddies during the day to save us from the rain or sun and paddy fields. It's like a portable wearable umbrella. Yeah, I know. That's in every literally every East Asian country has some version of the rice hat, which they usually use to work in the rice paddy fields or whatever, maybe soy, whatever they're growing. Suffice to say, I have not used it for any sort of field work. I've only worn it once or twice just to take a picture in it. Um, and because I'm, a anime geek. No, I'm not an engineer. Um, I like a, I wasn't interested in just it, I would rather do like a math degree than engineering because engineering just isn't interesting to me. Where you actually have to work out the actual like nitty gritty stuff. I like the theoretical stuff. I prefer either just pure mathematics or 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 doing experimental research. But engineering to me, this I didn't have much interest in it because I tried to consider like that when I was doing my double major, and I was just like, nah, I don't have anything. The closest thing that I was interested in was maybe software engineering. But even with software engineering, I'm not even interested in that. I'm more interested either in programming or cybersecurity than software engineering. And then I guess you could take software engineering two ways. You could either be like you have the degrees in software engineering either to put you into a place to actually develop software or to be a man or to be a manager for a software company. Um, and I'd rather be the manager. So, uh, double majors. Well, I was actually a triple major. It was psychology, philosophy, and linguistics. Because I was interested in cognitive science. Since my school didn't have a specific cognitive science degree, I just triple majored. I took psychology with emphasis on experimental. So I did bachelor's of science instead of a bachelor of arts in psychology. So it, you had to. So if you did a bachelor of science instead of a bachelor of arts in psychology, it was more heavily towards the natural sciences instead of the social sciences. Then I took philosophy with a concentration on cognitive science and then linguistics. So, how do you earn after having a psychology degree? Like, what are career options? I mean, there's many different career options. Psychology degrees tend to be the widest. The there are there is an incredible number of people who come out of college with psychology degrees. They are, as far as what you can do with it specifically, not a lot. You can, again, research assistant. Um, Again, the problem with any sort of research assistant job, not for psychology, but for any science field, is that when it comes to research assistants, usually those the researchers prefer to hire folks with graduate degrees over people with just undergrad degrees. That's that's the problem with trying to rely on your undergrad science degree for a career. Then the other thing is you can teach, but you can literally teach with any undergrad degree. Um, there, but there are also people who might be hired with a psych degree in something like, uh, rehabilitative therapy, or um, I mean, not rehabilitate. Well, with so dealing with like juveniles, like doing counseling or group homes, um, being psychological assistants, uh, sometimes working in marketing because it helps to have someone with a background in psychology when it comes to marketing. There's even a there's even now a field called neuro marketing. I not kid you not, where they take people who hold backgrounds in psychology and neuroscience, um, stuff like that, and they use them to develop marketing strategies based on actual like cognitive neuroscience. Um, but again, with any science degree, you're really not going to be able to utilize it unless you go on to grad school. That's why I said the whole the whole idea that STEM is better than liberal arts is misleading, because there's only very few degrees within the STEM field that are actually rewarding coming out of undergrad. Most STEM degrees, for them to be useful, you have to go on to graduate school. Um, but there are a lot of psychology degree holders because many people are interested in that sort of thing. Tends to be mostly women that hold degrees in psychology, which makes studying very interesting. um, but yeah, getting so my ex girlfriend was also a psychology graduate, but she cannot get into academia or get a job using the degree. I don't know what you mean about get into academia. She can get into academia if she wanted to further her psychology uh, pursuit, on a master's or doctoral level. Um, but there aren't that many jobs. So because people always try to say psychology is a bullshit degree, it's not that psychology is a bullshit degree. It's just that undergrad science degrees aren't useful in themselves, because an undergrad science degree is basically just preparing you for further work in that field. It's sort of like a black belt in martial arts. A black belt in martial arts doesn't mean you're an expert. A black belt just prepares you to do advanced training in that style of martial art, right? Um, the expertise doesn't come until you get different degrees of black belt. So, and it's the same thing with a science degree. A bachelor's in any science degree, whether it's psychology, biology, chemistry, physics, um, whatever. Um, Usually those degrees aren't aren't um, don't have a specific career field outside of being a research assistant within that field. But I said the problem with being a research assistant in any scientific field is that usually you're going to have to compete with people who have a graduate degree. So it's nothing wrong with getting a psychology degree. It's just that if you choose anyone choosing a degree in science should realize that the only way it's going to work is that they have to go on to graduate school, or they're going to have to choose a different career field outside of their outside of their degree. It's one or the other. Either you have a science degree, either you have to plan on going on to the graduate level, or once you graduate, you should anticipate doing something that has nothing related to your degree. Moonlit Seer, what's up? I don't know what's going on with Ray. He's usually cool. He's talking about let's fight. I don't I don't know. So anyway, so when it comes to politics, like I said, most of the pro black YouTubers usually lean conservative, but then they mix it with, these pro black policies and views, like I say, like dating within your race, which gets back to my first criticism of them telling men to basically um, make a highly personal decision just based on perceived racial unity over people whom they find to be compatible with them and to whom they are attracted. That is more important than dating someone out of so-called racial unity. And I hate when people will say, "Well, you see how hard it is right now with racial dynamics that who would want to go into an interracial relationship? That's just gonna make things harder." That's just fucking that doesn't even make sense. That doesn't even make sense. It doesn't make sense. Don't look. No one's getting hung on a tree for dating interracially. No one's credit score is going to go down for dating interracially. If anything, it's often a joke amongst me and a few of my friends that you date white, your credit score is going to go up. um, like the cops aren't going to beat you up because you dating Becky. Like it's like I don't get that sort of advice. And again, a lot of these dudes be from the deep south saying dumb shit like that because no one up north is really saying stuff like that because people up north tend to be more. Here's the funny thing: there's a lot. The irony to this is that there's a lot of interracial dating in the South. There's a lot of interracial dating in the South. The but I think the difference is in the North, it's just more open. Dating, like interracial dating, I think is just more socially acceptable up north. But there's I don't have the numbers on that. Someone if they want to fact check me on that. But there's a lot of interracial dating down south. But it's just more socially acceptable up north than it is down south. And a lot of these brothers who are pro black YouTubers or whatever tend to be from the south. And that's why they'll say little stupid shit that doesn't make sense, like, well, being that with the Trump administration coming at these immigrants and non-black and non-white people, don't you think it's going to make it hard on yourself if you date interracially? Like, no, not remotely, not remotely so. Blacks have been dating interracially since they stepped in America, whether legally or illegally. Melissa is extremely large in the South. I assume predominantly interracial relationships and families, mine included. Yeah, like I said, there's a lot of interracial dating in the South. I can't say whether it's more prevalent in the South than in the North, but I think the difference is just the cultural values that is more socially acceptable up north than it is down south. But like if you go to Florida, forget about it. And places like Arizona, like there's man, please. And then the funny thing is this uh the thing is he's talking about white people, but black men are mostly preferring Latina women over. If you look at the numbers, yes, a lot of them date white women, but a lot of them prefer Latinas of all when it comes to interracial dating. I don't know if the preference equals the numbers, but if you ask men, these black men, as far as their subjective preferences, most of them prefer Latinos, Latino women. Shout out to the Latinas. That's why I said Trump needs to put an exemption in. All all thick Latinas can stay, legal or illegal. If she's a thick Latina, she stays. She's a thick Latina. She calls you Poppy and makes you some makes you some roscopollo. She stays. Instant green card. Like, hold up, she just threw it back for a whole clapathon session that made me some food and called me Poppy the whole time. Oh no, she getting a green card. She getting that green card right now, bro. same same thing with Su Yi. I don't care if Su Yi is actually from North Korea or she's a or she's a CCP spy. Su Yi is throwing it back. Had the clapathon session. Then she went on and made me some amazing uh fried rice with some mango and you know uh mushu pork or something with the yakame. Like, oh no, Su Yi stand. Su Yi stand. She ain't as thick as Maricela over here, but she threw it back with the best with the best of them. Just pure clap, 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 clap. Who else? Um, yeah, because they've been people don't talk about it because they always trying to talk say that he's only sending non-white people back. He's been sending Europeans back too. I don't think people realize that he hasn't just been sending Latinos and Asians back. He's been sending East Europe. He's been sending Eastern Europeans back home too. But that doesn't make the news because it defeats the narrative that the Trump administration is racist. So it would defeat that narrative that he's also sending illegal Europeans back as well. But if you look it up, he's been sending illegal Europeans back too. So no, uh, Sri Lanka, Sri Lanka too. Sri Lanka is the purest of pure snow, right? The purest of pure snow. and and appreciate you subbing to my channel, brother. Um, and what can I say about the food she fixed? I don't know. Sri Lanka, she can cook. Um, and if you show her how to use this the seasoned salt, she'll use it, and she'll just be happy all the time. You go out and your credit score goes up. You're looking at your Equifax report and your TransUnion report. Like, hold up, how does this go up 100 points? It's like, well, look who you got on your arm, brother. Stop. But no, but no, like, look, telling like it's okay to be conservative, but when they're trying to tell people you should stick to your own race. First of all, what race? Because most racial categories don't even fit within valid scientific classification. Not that there aren't actual racial differences. Obviously, there are biological racial differences, or uh, you couldn't have medical disorders that only affect certain racial groups. Nor could you start making research that targets certain racial groups. Nor could you have physical anthropologists be able to identify a skeleton by its race. So obviously there are valid racial classifications, but usually what we consider race tends to be very superficial, usually based on phenotypes and stuff like that. But in any case, the whole idea of mixing politics with racial solidarity, I think, is fundamentally flawed. And some of these people push that. Mullet says, Seven Campus, feel free to join in this conversation and talk as well. Let's leave a like while you enjoy the listen. um, but yeah, so, and then the other thing is to be the other problem with the pro black YouTubers, like I said, because they do lean conservative, they tend to make it seem as if to be masculine, you have to be um, more politically with the right. And this is why I see so many people on the left kind of like wincing at the manosphere because they think that the manosphere is all about pushing conservative um, ideas, which actually is not true because there's actually a a quite a division between the red pill manosphere space and the online conservatives. So, but we don't need to get into that here. Um, what else? Because I'm gonna wrap this up. Uh, and of course, like I said, you got a lot of people in the pro black space that are hoteps and pan Africanists. I don't even pay them any mind because almost all of them are scammers. Almost all of them who are hoteps or pan Africanists are typically asking their audience to give them money for something, whether it's to build fake schools like Umar. Sorry, he's the only one I'm gonna call out by name because he's I just don't take him seriously. But yeah, you got some of them that will ask you for money so they can build their fake schools. Others so they can build a museum. If you know, you know. Others who want you to fund their lifestyle basically as they live abroad overseas or travel overseas. They want you to fund that lifestyle. So they push this little pro black or hotep or pan Africanist sort of viewpoint. Um, and then getting into again, doing stuff that's only within your race and getting back to education is, they push going to HBCUs. And I'm sorry, HBCUs were useful at a time when black people couldn't get into mainstream colleges and universities. Now we can. So, I mean, it's no, I, I have nothing against people going to HBCUs, but I don't find it. it's I don't find it to be a priority that black kids should have to go to a HBCUs to support them to keep them thriving. If those HBCUs can't compete with mainstream colleges and universities, they will just have to go the way of the dodo. Like no, like black kids are not like these prospective students are are not supposed to be the what saves these schools. These schools are supposed to be saving them, not the other way around. Like I said, they existed at a time when uh, when non white students weren't allowed in mainstream schools because it's just the same. Like there was historic Jewish universities and historic women universities because a lot a lot of those women weren't allowed into those colleges and universities. A lot of Jewish students weren't allowed in these mainstream colleges and universities. But what happened was once they started getting accepted into mainstream colleges and universities, a lot of those women universities became co-ed. A lot of those Jewish universities either um, became mainstream themselves. So they're gonna have to do that. So for these HBCUs to have to continue to thrive, they can't just cater to just a like a majority black student body and expecting only to expect that black students need to make up the bulk of the HBCUs for them to thrive is is unfair. Why should they deprive themselves of going to a more prestigious institution just to say just to say they went to an HBCU? And even in the show Blackish that came on back in the day, the main the main character went to Howard University, and he often worked with coworkers who didn't even know what Howard was. It's like, and the funny thing is, Howard University is arguably the most prestigious of all the HBCUs, outside of maybe Morgan State and Spelman. I mean, not Morgan. I'm sorry, not Morgan, as I was Morehouse or Spelman. Like you have Howard, which is probably the most prestigious of the HBCUs. Then you have Morehouse and Spelman. Those are the most well known of the HBCUs. Matter of fact, there are so many HBCUs I didn't even know about them until BET 25 years ago used to have a show called Hits from the Streets, and he used to go to different historically black college campuses on TV, on and they used to come on. And I was like, man, I didn't know there was a black college here and there, and like I didn't know there was a historically black college university in the Caribbean, but in the U.S. Virgin Islands, there's the University of the of the Virgin Islands, and they even did a reality show on that campus. And I remember back then I was telling a friend at the time, I was like, man, I wish I could have went there. I was like, that is the only. I was telling my friend, I was like, that's the only HBCU I would want to go to is one that's on a Caribbean island, because every day would just be like paradise. Going to a HBCU in the Virgin Islands. But I didn't even know about it. Like I said, if I'd known about it, I would have applied to that. I would have applied there just to see if I could get in. Probably would have, because HBCUs typically take lower GPA scores than most places. They typically take lower GPA scores and lower SAT scores. The 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 downside to that is that means that you tend to get media. You get less. You get you don't get the best students. He's saying Hillman. Yeah, I'm not gonna mention whose museum that is on here because I don't need that. I don't need that brother coming after me. But yeah, Hillman. I love the Different World though. That was one of my favorite shows. Um, like I don't care what people say about Bill Cosby. I will always love Bill Cosby for the fact that he normalized the black middle class. Like nowadays, and like I said, I mentioned this earlier. I don't know if you were here, Carlton, on the stream when I was saying this, but I was like looking at the stats now. Most black men are actually now within the are are in the middle class, and but back in the 80s, all the black TV shows and sitcoms were all like uh they were like poverty porn type shows. Like I couldn't like uh Good Times. I couldn't stand Good Times. The only time I watched Good Times was the very last season of Good Times when they started doing well. That's when I like Good Times. Or Benson, when once he like I started watching Benson, but I really didn't watch when I started watching Benson was like in the last seasons, like when he was running for mayor or whatever, or governor, whatever it was. I didn't know that in the earlier seasons he was like just a butler, um, and that was a spinoff of an earlier show. Like the black shows I watched was like Different Strokes and Webster, where it was like a black kid taken out of the ghetto and living with a wealthy white family. And watching those shows, I always wished that I was like either Arnold or Webster, living with a wealthy white family, so I could have what I want instead of struggle. Um, but I couldn't identify with those because I was living in the middle class as a kid, so I couldn't identify with those little struggle shows like Good Times and What's Happening. Like I like What's Happening Now because again, the spinoff What's Happening Now, they weren't struggling anymore, but I couldn't identify with struggles with those little struggle porn sitcoms like Good Times, What's Happening, Sanford and Son. Like I, I didn't live like that. I could identify with the I could identify more with the Cosby Show because I had my mom and my stepfather, and then later on I was living with my father and my stepmother. So you know I lived in homes where there was more than one parent and two incomes, where the parents were college educated. Like I'm not a first generation. I'm not a. I'm not the first generation of my family to go to school. So, um, I I could identify more with the Cosbys and different world. Like to because of Cosby Show in a different world. To me, it normalized black kids going to college. So when I became a teenager, I just safely assumed that that was my trajectory, was that I was going on to college from high school. Like matter of fact, I started applying for colleges in the ninth grade. Like I literally no, not applied. I'm sorry. I I started going to college fairs in the ninth grade, and I remember the people looking at me because because you imagine how young I looked at at 13 and 14 when I started high school. Like I'm probably just turned 14 when I was going to these college fairs, and they were looking at me like, "Oh, you want to go to college?" I'm like, yeah. To me, that was just normal. I don't know how many other high school kids went to a college fair at 14 years old, but it didn't. You know, I was ready for that already. Matter of fact, my father wanted me to skip a year of high school and graduate early, which I didn't. So I I guess he thought I was being lazy, but whatever. Um, it wasn't that. It's just that I didn't want to miss out on my senior year of school. I felt like my senior year was like my rites of passage to be a senior or whatever. But yeah, different world. Even though it's a HBCU, again, like it normalized going to college. Like Theo didn't go off to HBCU. He went off to New York. He went to NYU. Um, I don't know where the older sister went. I can't remember if they said she went to Hillman or she went somewhere else before she met Alvin. But of course, Denise dropped out of Hillman and moved back home briefly before she got fired from the show. But whatever. Anyway, I like Different World now. I definitely disagree with even back then. I disagree with some of the episodes that got more controversial, where where Dwayne Wayne and this other guy were arguing over the merits of going to a predominantly white institution, a PWI, versus going to HBCU, because I think that the guy he was debating with was right, that a PWI more realistically prepares you for the real world than the HBCU, because he was saying you're not going to be around mostly black people in, when you go off into your career. And he's absolutely right. So, but whatever. Who did someone drop a a super gift? I didn't even see that. Let me make sure I give whoever dropped that their proper. Um, uh, hmm. Yeah, I'm not paying any attention to her tat. She's obviously autistic or retarded. I don't I don't I don't take seriously the comments of people who are mentally dysfunctional. But if someone dropped the gem, and I can't see who dropped it. Uh, so I definitely want to give my thanks to whoever dropped the gem. Darn it. Whoever dropped the gem, thank you. I cannot see who did it. Yeah, she's definitely touched in the head. But anyway, yeah, I definitely will use the word Ted, because Ted word because like I said, like another YouTuber was saying that he was like, we need to start bringing the R word back, because when people are I acting in a low IQ capacity, or behaving or talking in a low IQ capacity, we need to bring shaming back to calling these people out for it. Like, you don't get to just use display stupid behavior and not get called out for it. So I'm old school, so I will do that. Um, but in any case, I'm about to go, guys. But yeah, like I said, so the guy was complaining. So like I said, this pro black YouTuber was complaining because basically he gave scholarships to some HBCU students, and I defended him on that because apparently some people were attacking him on that. And I was like, how are you going to attack someone on their philanthropy? Again, just like relationships, philanthropy is a very personal decision. So I wish he made that connection himself. What, like when he was criticizing people today, saying that they should date, that we should stop this gender war within the black community because it's basically destroying us from within, and that dating white isn't gonna give you better outcomes. Like, it'll give you better outcomes, one, if that's the women that you are actually attracted to, and they're less toxic. So, well, yeah, because you can't use the word. You can't use the word because it's one of those trigger words that that my AI moderation will time people out for. But yeah, um, I can say it as the content creator. But yeah, plus YouTube has given us more free speech than they have in the past 3 years. That's why we can now say it. Couldn't say it 3 years ago and not have your stream demonetized. Matter of fact, I mean, they're definitely coming more down on free speech today. I mean, recently, as they've allowed both Sneeko and Andrew Tate to return back to the platform after banning both of them. So, just goes to show free speech is winning. And it's all because of the presidential election. I guarantee if Kamala Haha had won last year, they would still be restricting our free speech rights. You have free speech as long as you don't talk about the LGBTQ, you don't talk about all this other sort of stuff that the left cherishes. You can't have like free speech. When it comes to free speech, you have to be comfortable with the fact that you have to protect speech that you are vehemently against. That's the only way it works. So, um, in any way, so like I said, it'd be nice if the black YouTuber was consistent with, you know, in his defense of HBCU students as he was with people who want to date interracially, because they're both personal decisions. Just like going to HBCU may not be the best option for someone going to college. Um, it's a personal decision. And if he wants to give his scholarship, if he wants to give a scholarship to a HBCU student, he has every right to do so. It's his money. He can do his charitable donations and philanthropy wherever he chooses with his own money. So he said people were also criticizing the fact that these kids would go to HBCUs in the first place. He was like, he doesn't understand the hate against HBCUs. And I was like, merit to there is some merit to why some people disagree with HBCUs. One, they tend to be, well, I'm just gonna say it from people I know who've gone there, and I've almost went to one myself. Is that they tend to be less professional. I'm just gonna keep it a buck. Many of these HBCUs tend to be less professional. Um, Two, they're less prestigious. It If you go to an HBCU, like I was telling someone else, if you go to HBCU, you better get a practical degree. Like you can't like when you go to one of the most elite colleges in the country, it doesn't matter really what your degree is in because the people are looking at the name on your degree, not the type of degree that you got. If you went to Harvard, it doesn't matter what your degree is in. You could have majored in you know, Legos for all they care. All people will see is that you graduated with a degree from Harvard. It doesn't matter that it was in Legos. But if you go to a HBCU that no one's ever heard of before, like Texas State University, you better have taken it in something that you better have gotten a practical degree. Um, Again, like in engineering, computer science, mathematics, something like that. Because without the prestige without the prestige of the university itself, the only thing that's going to sell you is the type of degree that you have. And that's a reason why some people wouldn't choose to go to a HBCU if they have good enough grades to get into an elite institution. third, they tend to have less federal not federal student. They tend to have smaller endowments, if any at all, uh, and can't offer students that many resources. I remember just at my alma mater, and again, University of Maryland isn't the top elite schools, but it has climbed up to like I believe number 14 or something as far as top research universities in the country. So it has gone up. But when you're talking about the most elite institutions, they have some of the best resources for students. In Maryland, like I remember just 25 years ago, it was a chick coming from like Morgan State University, and we were in the dining hall, and I was looking at ice cream, and she's like, "You guys got so many different ice cream flavors to choose from." I was like, "What? You guys don't at your college?" She was like, "No." She's at Morgan. She's like, "Only thing we got is vanilla and chocolate." I was like, "Oh, damn." Okay. Let me get some water, guys. Mind you, she was cute. Then there was another chick, and she wasn't even black. She was Asian. She was Thai. It was a Thai chick. And she was going to a historically black college, the same college, Morgan State in Baltimore. I actually came to visit her on Thanksgiving weekend because when my grandmother was still alive, she always made Thanksgiving dinner on Sundays because when she used to work uh, as a domestic helper. She was a maid basically for rich, for some rich white families. I think mostly Jewish. Um, and so she was never able to cook a Thanksgiving dinner on Thursday. So she used to always make it Sunday for the family, and she continued that tradition. And so my family, we would always go to my grandmother's house on Sunday because she would cook this huge Thanksgiving dinner. Like it would be so much food. Like she would be begging us, here, take some of this food with you. I can't. She's like, I'm not gonna eat all this. You guys need to take this food with you. It would be so much food. And so the girl and I was wanted to link up. So I was telling my father that because my grandma lived in East Baltimore, not too far from Morgan. So I was like, I'm gonna go visit my friend at on the campus. So he's like, all right. So he decided to drive. He took me over there actually, and told me he's like, here, take a plate for her. I was like, all right. So I actually took her a plate of Thanksgiving dinner or whatever. She seasoned it like she was seasoning it. Southeast Asians like seasoning. So, um, but she was like, "Oh, you go to Maryland." She's like, "I don't like you." I'm like, "Why?" She's like, "Cause they wouldn't let me in their school." I was like, "Oh, for real?" She was like, "No." She was like, I applied for their business school. She said I couldn't get into their business school because the business school was separate from the other. The business school you had to apply to separately from applying to the university itself. So you could make it. You might get admitted to the university, but you might not get admitted into the business school because eh, I mean, again, it's not like an Ivy League school, but it was pretty a pretty hard program to get into at the time. And she was like, "Oh," so she was like, "That's why I went to Morgan because I couldn't get into Maryland's business school." I was like, "Oh, okay, I see." So apparently she had a thing for brothers. I mean, obviously she's going to the HBCU. That's pretty much all she could date because it's not going to be like there's any Asian guys on the campus of Morgan State University. But yeah, like they have less resources. They, they're some again their administrations tend to be a little less professional. Their degrees are less prestigious. which means you have to get a practical degree if you go to an HBCU because your 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 degree is not going to stand out on name alone. Um, Now, again, I'm not saying they should end the HBCUs, but they need to be more accepting of non-black students because that's the only way they're going to thrive in today's age, where the best black students are probably going to go to a predominantly white institution. And the fact that this black YouTuber didn't fail to understand that that's why most black people don't take HBCUs seriously anymore. That's why, again, there's the perception that these HBCUs don't offer the same quality of education, which is and is not true depending on the particular institution. But what also is definitely true is they're less prestigious overall than going to a predominantly white institution. So I don't know why he didn't understand that. So with that being said, it's 2 hours in and it's 2 a.m. So it's definitely time for me to go, guys. So I'm gonna be out. Take it easy. We can carry on the conversation in the comment section. I will get to that stuff, but until then, I'm out. Take care. Thanks, Carlton.